Have you heard of the divorce contagion study? Rose McDermott, a political science professor at Brown University, found in her research that divorce is socially contagious. People are 75% more likely to get divorced if a friend of theirs is divorced. This effect extends to 2 degrees of separation. You are affected by the friends of your friends, even if you don't know them. Further studies have shown that this doesn't stop at divorce. It extends to stress, it extends to obesity, it extends to burnout. And isn't that a powerful thought? We become that which we surround ourselves with. We become that who we surround ourselves with. So I became fascinated with the idea of contagion. What other social variables might also be contagious? And if negative variables are contagious, then so must be positive variables. If divorce is contagious, so must be happiness, for example. If stress is contagious, so must be enlightenment, right? And then, how can we take agency and responsibility over our lives so that we can not only thrive ourselves, but also become catalysts of spreading positive variables around? And this is how I'd like you to think of this podcast. By listening to the stories about meaningful transformations, you become infected in a sense and are likely to experience a transformation yourself. So call upon your friends. Remember, this contagion can extend to 2 degrees of separation. And I'm surrounded by people who want to make an impact on the world, who want to do something good in the world. But what better way and more direct way is there to be the positive change that you want to see in the world than by being transformed yourself, by sharing your positive story? This is why I like this episode so much. My guest is here to share her powerful story of transformation, one that happens to involve plant medicine. But my intention is not to condone psychedelics. This is not what this podcast is about. The contagion that I hope to spread is about self-love and self-empowerment. Your most mind-altering hour of the week. Hi, you're listening to Shift Happens, and I'm your host, Ina. Varia.
Ina.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome. Very nice to have you on this podcast. And I know it's not easy to be a pioneer. May this story and your sharing help not only you, but also the listeners who are part of this Shift community.
Absolutely. And when I was starting out in my different plant adventures, stories like this were my lifeline because I had no idea what to expect, and any bit of information I could get was so valuable. So I'm really happy to contribute.
Who was Varia before this last psychedelic experience, which happened this weekend?
Yes, she was someone who was really trying to find love and joy in her life, and not quite looking for it in all the wrong places, but stumbling around a little bit and getting quite frustrated that things weren't falling into place the way that she wanted. I had started to really explore the world of the spiritual and the more esoteric. So I had started doing a sound healing training, and I started exploring plant medicines, and I started doing a somatic bodywork training and practice. And at the same time, I had a really strong, like a critical part of me that was looking at all of this and saying, what are you doing? This is so silly.
Tell me more. Why did it feel silly?
Well, I grew up in a family that really valued a proper career. My parents are both in IT. They're technologists, and their biggest dream for me was that I would work in technology and be financially independent. And I am. I'm doing that, and that's great, and I've achieved everything. But anything outside of that as a career path or even a life path, to me there's resistance there because of my upbringing, because of my friendship circles, because of the life that I've built hasn't historically stretched to accommodate the more interesting, mysterious parts of life that I want to explore.
To this day, I have to say, my mother has no idea what these podcasts are all about, the work that I do, the kind of philanthropy for science that I'm undertaking. If she would find out, I think I would break her heart.
Same here. I studied psychology, and I have deep respect for the psychological tradition. I've probably done every kind of therapy that exists out there as almost like a personal hobby. Like, I love to experiment with them. I love to experience them. I love to learn what they have to teach me. But to your point, there was a point a few years ago where I just said, okay, I think I've reached my limit of what psychotherapy can offer me. And that's when I started looking into sound therapy, somatic therapy. I mean, the integration of the body is so important into the entire experience of understanding what's going on inside of you, and traditional psychotherapy is just not there. So, in a way, I think we have to look outside the norms.
Who is Varia today?
Today, I feel very today I feel aligned with my heart, and I feel that there is magic in the universe. And yeah, I mean, I'm only 3 days out of my experience, so it's all still a little bit churning in my brain, but I really feel connected to my heart and the love that's there, and that is what I was searching for this entire 2 years.
As I listen to you speak, my heart just like grows and opens. So it just talks to how important these experiences are, not just on an individual level, but that they are contagious, and I can almost download it into my own heart. So thank you so much. Oh, so the joy and the homecoming, the feeling of homecoming that is felt after such an experience. And I'm sure that our listeners are now, okay, just cut to the chase. We want to hear what she did, how she did it, where she did it, how exactly did it go. So what's the first thing that you want to share?
I participated in an ayahuasca retreat in the Netherlands. And it was 3 ceremonies over the course of 3 nights.
This session, the way we're recording it, is in a sense part of your integration process. And everybody's talking about integration. And I do believe that that's critical, and it's super important to have this kind of moments of reflection, but also bouncing back and some kind of a coaching where you can take what happened and make meaningful connections from the various experiences or visions. Whilst the science world is looking at the plasticity or neuroplasticity that takes place with the consumption or with the use of psychedelics, my main question is always like, okay, so yeah, you are taking those psychedelics, your mind is expanding, the default mode network is going offline, and then what, right? I mean, therefore, for me, the question is much more about pre-psychedelic experience, integration or pre-integration session rather than post-integration. And I know the whole world is looking at the post-integration. What kind of methodologies can we develop, and what kind of process can we put into place to support people who are going through these experiences? I'm thinking like a good analogy for it is that I often use is, imagine that you would have a magic tool that would take you to the gate of heaven. God would open the door and would say, "Hello, dear Varia. Here you are. Thank you for coming. What are you coming for?" Right? And that's how I look at pre-integration versus the post-integration. Post-integration for me, okay, I've had conversations with God. This is what I've received, and here's what I take from it, and this is what I'm going to do with it. But preparing for such a moment in your life, preparing for such transformation, you've already mentioned some elements. You said it is so important that I've done the somatic work. It's so important that I've done the sound healing. It's so important that I've looked into the spiritual aspects of life. It's so important that I've done psychology, psychotherapy, and all other forms of therapy. They have all been a part of me and my life before going there. So your integration or pre-integration process had started way back. But we also had a pre-integration session before your weekend, just 3 days also before the session itself. How do you feel that has contributed, or has it contributed?
Yes, I'm really grateful that you and I had that pre-integration session. It was the first time I did something like that before a psychedelic or plant medicine experience. And what we discussed really helped me to almost not process the experience as it was happening. Maybe I will talk about that when I describe the experience. But what it really helped me to do was not be so rigid in my expectations of what was going to happen. Which is funny because I thought a pre-integration session, you come and you talk about your intention and you go out of it with your laser-focused intention.
You make a strategy, you make a plan, yes. Change management plan, and you come in prepared and you're going to manage the whole thing, control it from beginning to end.
Exactly. And and in the end, it wasn't like that at all. I did come in with an intention for this experience. My intention was to find my purpose and my path. But the way that our discussion went, it was so much more about contextualizing, just like you were doing now, about where am I in life right now? What have I experienced before? And how might this either come to bear in the experience itself, or, which I found really useful, what kind of tools can I gather in advance that I already have from all of my experience.
Yeah, the toolkit come in handy. That's nice. I can't wait to hear. So for the listeners, I haven't heard the experience at all. So I'm just as curious as everybody else who's listening right now is.
Yes, and I think one thing I will mention about the integration session, because it came back up in the experience, the pre-integration session, is that we spoke about strengths that I have and, like you said, the toolkit, things that I have that I can carry with me and be inside an experience that is destabilizing and the default mode network is offline and you are a little bit free floating in your psyche. There are tools that you can draw on. And one of the things that we talked about was this way that I have of knowing. It's like an intuition that is extremely strong, that when I feel it and when I listen to it, I'm always aligned to reality, and it's kind of a manifestation power. And we talked about creating a symbol so that I could remember that power easily.
The anchor.
The anchor. The symbol that came to me was an anchor. And I want to incorporate this into the story because it comes back later, and I thought it was
Bring on the anchors.
Yes, but we have to wait till the third night.
Oh no, this is such a cliffhanger. But maybe it's nice to talk about the other tools, because now we speak about pre-integration. We speak about a session that we had before, so that's a coaching session that we had before your ayahuasca retreat, and during which we discussed, and actually I kind of scouted in your psyche what kind of strengths or superpowers, that's what I like to call them, that you have, that you may be aware of, but you're not sure that you are. And in your case, you were aware of them. Not everybody is. But then how do you easily access those tools or superpowers in a moment of when your mind is a little bit offline, so to speak? So then, because the psyche works with symbolical images, we created different types of symbols. We put them in a symbolical goodie bag, which I told you to take with you to the session. And then when you are experiencing a moment that you feel, oh, now I need some of my superpowers, that you just kind of call upon your anchors, I wanted to call them, but you call upon your tools or your superpowers out of the toolbox, and that helps to have them in a symbolical image. Because then you cannot really say, well, what was, you're not really cognitively capable to say, what was that intuitive knowing that I used to have, being very rational and explicit about it. But when you say, oh, the anchor, voila, it's there, right?
The other one that I remembered really strongly in the ceremony, which is quite funny, it's the one we call Dali. When I am traveling in these different experiences, I often see the world in a kind of colorful, a little bit dark, kind of melting way. And that visualization, those images, help me to kind of orient myself and go, oh, okay, I know how to interpret this world because I know the paintings and the work of Dali. Yeah, and then the last one, actually there were two more. So the last kind of superpower or tool that we drew on was the ability to call upon people and beings that were hugely important, but were not with me. And I think it might be interesting to mention that the previous time I did ayahuasca was 2 years ago. I was with my boyfriend at the time, who is now my ex. And I was really nervous about going into this experience alone.
Without him.
And we discussed that, well, if you really need someone, you can just call them. Yeah. And their spirit will, this sounds very, very esoteric, but their spirit will come and be with you. You can feel them when you need them.
So we discussed that your ex at that moment in time we could look at him more as a proxy versus as a person or a human being. And a proxy comes in many shapes and forms. I mean, what kind of qualities, what kind of values does he represent for you? What kind of energy did he remind you of? And those as a oneness, as a holistic kind of container for a person, those are valuable in and of themselves. So rather, if you would have attributed it to, well, it's my ex that I need, then you would have to deprive yourself of a superpower. And in this case, I saw the values that he brought as an actual useful tool for you to call upon in a session like that. And therefore, that I hope that that's the experience that you had. It reduces or removes the need to have to go through the traumatic processing of, hey, he's no longer my current partner, and having to go down that rabbit hole. Meanwhile, you're here to do a different type of work. So I hope that's the experience you had.
Absolutely. And the last thing that you mentioned, and you can say this better than I can, but it was we discussed what to do when the ego acts up.
Yeah. And I promised you it will.
Yes, yeah. You did, and it did. And the main thing that I took away with me was, remember that you can fly. And I would love for you to explain the bird on the branch again.
I'm looking for the context. I'm trying to remember the context in which the bird came up.
Yeah, so you were basically saying what happens when you feel contraction and you feel that there's fear and you're not sure what's going on and whether you can move on from this experience.
Yeah. I think maybe it was related also to the experience of needing the world around you or the context to behave in order for your ego to not have to act up, right? And when I say behave, is like many people have the experience of being frustrated or annoyed by the environment. There are people vomiting around you. There are people screaming around you. There are others singing, others dancing, and therefore your ego can cling on to those external sources of potential frustration as a way of holding you here and now, rather than letting you surrender to the experience and getting to the depth of your soul. So I think we discussed it in that context, but correct me if I'm wrong. And then I thought, okay, well, what do you do, or how do you silence the ego in that sense? And then the analogy of a bird on a branch came to me, and that was that, how does a bird on a branch does the bird on a branch trust the branch will not break? AKA, does the ego need the whole world around it to be perfect in order to surrender? Or does the bird trust its own wings that it can fly? So using that as another symbol that you could take with you into the toolkit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did.
And it applied to the context of ego dissolution that you experienced. So curious about it. So Varia, take us away. First day, you took ayahuasca.
Yes.
You knew your intention. You had your toolkit. You had your superpowers.
Yes. Yes. So a little bit of context. The first time that I did ayahuasca 2 years ago, I experienced something called an ego death. And the way that manifested for me, which is, I would say, from what I've read, a relatively common manifestation, is I felt like my whole body was dissolving and coming apart. And I tried and eventually succeeded in surrendering to that and allowing myself to dissolve. And that is really scary, because you really feel in that moment like you are dying. You feel like there is no way back. There is nothing left of you. There is no body. There is no mind. There's nothing. And then you come back. You are reborn. And the reason I bring that up is because I came with a big fear of that happening again to the first session. And I also, one more piece of context, I didn't realize, even when we were speaking, I only really truly realized it when I arrived at the retreat. I was so depressed.
Oh, yeah, you were holding up a very strong face when we spoke, and you were being rational, you were being pragmatic, and yet there were so many things in your life that would indicate that there was some grief and sadness. Yes. Underneath.
Yeah, there was a lot of, so there was grief from a recent breakup, from my beloved pet being really, really sick. And also there was, probably triggered by all of that, there was a really, really deep depression. And the way that it manifested this time is I was really trying to erase myself. I really didn't want to be seen. That's what I realized when I arrived in this group of 30 people. I was like hiding myself away in corners. I was feeling like almost like a kid, like I was back in my 11-year-old body when I was being bullied in school, and I just wanted to go into a corner and hide, and I felt that everyone who talked to me didn't want to talk to me. And
I feel this so much. And you know what cats do when they get sick and just before they're about to die, they don't come and hang around. They go hide in under beds, corners.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was doing. So although I had this grand intention of let me find my purpose, I realized pretty quickly in starting that first session, like, okay, there's something here that's more present right now that's going to have to come first. And that was that depression. So with all that context, we started the ceremony on the first day, and actually I had this throughout all 3 days, which is so ayahuasca It's offered 3 times, but you don't have to take all 3, and everybody decides for themselves what they want to do. So in my case, all 3 ceremonies, I took the first cup and I experienced nothing. But luckily, there's a lot to pay attention to during ceremonies, so you're not just sitting there in silence. There's many, many beautiful things that take place that are done by the shaman and by the team. So for instance, they set an intention for the space, they open the space, they invite the different elements. It's really beautiful. And then they start singing, and they sing the Icaros for the first part of the ceremony, which are, of course, from the Amazonian tradition. Yes. Okay. And it's beautiful. So I was not sitting there bored, but it was a bit annoying that I was sitting there and nothing was happening. So I took the second cup on the first night. And I started dying again.
What you were afraid of
Yes.
happened.
It happened, and it happened big time.
Oh, even bigger than the first time.
Yes, because the first time it happened only once.
Remember I said when you told me, well, I'm afraid of this ego death, I said, I hope it happens.
Mm-hmm. But you also said, well, because you've already experienced it, maybe it won't happen.
Yeah. Maybe you have the tools now, yeah.
Yeah, no, it happened, and it really, and I share this because it's my story. I don't want to scare people with this, but it's a thing that can happen during these ceremonies where you become a little bit, not quite trapped. Well, yeah, trapped. You become a little bit trapped in something that is challenging. That's part of the process. And so in my case, it was dying over and over and over again. And this is the part that I eventually realized was happening. I was narrating it to myself in my head the whole time because I was like, oh, I know this. This has happened to me before. It's fine. This was a narrative going on as my body is dissolving, as I'm like completely scared and everything is kind of disappearing. But somehow there was still a part of my brain that was going, no, it's fine. I know. I just need to surrender. It's cool. And so this battle was going on where I would dissolve. I think I would surrender, and then I would come back and it would start again. Just like, what?
And it would be the same experience again and again, or different forms of dying?
It was the same. It was really, it felt like my body was really dissolving, and I got really, really heavy. I couldn't move. And I started sinking into the floors and the walls, and it doesn't feel like fear in that moment, even though I rationally later realized that it is fear. It's more like a heavy blanket on top of my head. It's the best way I can describe it. Like in that time, I didn't really feel scared as such. I just felt like everything was really difficult. Like and I was more frustrated. I think I couldn't move. I couldn't get up. I couldn't interact. I couldn't pay attention to the beautiful music. And all I was doing was just disappearing over and over again. And that was kind of the first night. And in fact, another thing that happened for the first time for me was the shaman closed the ceremony, and it was still happening. I was still dying. And so I had to call him over and say, like, look, I need help. This is not stopping, and what do I do? And so he sat down with me, and it was really beautiful. He of course there's things they can do. He blew some tobacco over me. This is their communication with the medicine. But he also, actually the tools he was giving me were really practical. He said, hey, laugh a little bit about yourself. Don't take yourself so seriously. This is just the first night. Like, you're already going so deep.
That's It's hilarious, the simplicity.
Right? It was so simple and it was effective. Like it brought me back a little bit. I was like, oh yeah, this is just the first night. I'm okay. Like, but these are tools that you gather from these ceremonies as well, even though you think you go there to take psychedelics and see visions and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, it's how you're dealing with really challenging situations. And one of the tools is, hey, remember that there is joy and laughter and lightness also in you. And you're being a little silly right now.
I love how you're bringing it back to the fact that this is not just about the tools that we can use for, the psychedelic experience itself, but tools that we take for ourselves for life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. So that was the first night.
I remember this one session where I was vomiting profusely. I was vomiting a lot, and the shaman or the facilitator came and said, okay, you vomited enough, now that's enough. And I thought, no, I really need more, and I kept going and going. I won't vocalize it right now, but it was intense. And then he said, I just need this bucket for 1 second, I'm going to just replace it, okay? So I'll just take it and I thought, if you take it, your whole floor is going to be covered in vomit right now, right? And he just took it away. He never came back. And I stopped, right? So again, such a simple trick of how we get so caught up in our dramas, how we get so caught up in, I must suffer in order to deserve something. I must suffer. I must die and die and die. I must vomit and vomit and vomit in order to deserve this enlightenment or the breakthrough experience. And how does that apply to our lives? And how do we live our lives? And what kind of character formation does that represent, right? I mean, how do you walk through life thinking, I must really work hard in order to deserve any kind of goodness?
That's such a perfect example. And I'm really glad that you mentioned this idea that we hang on to the concept of suffering to earn something better, because I think it's excellent to research, obviously, what you're going to do before you do it. And I think it's amazing to have context and experiences from other people. But I also recognize that I am the kind of person that really holds on to the negatives. And so I remembered, like, okay, it's hard work. You might die like this. And I really think that did impact me a little bit, because I was sitting there going, no, this is how it's supposed to be. And then it was so great to have somebody come and be like, it's okay. You don't have to, this is fine. You can laugh. You can find some humor in this situation.
Lovely. Yeah. And then came the next day.
Yes. So the next day I was heading into the session. It was feeling good. I had just had this experience of a lot of ego death, and I thought, okay, but now I've really done enough. Like now it's going to be over. It wasn't. It wasn't over. There was more. But it was. It was different, and the thing that changed. Actually, there's something else I still want to mention about the first night, because I think it's really important for the second night. The one thing that happened on the first night before I started all the dying was I turned the camera lens of my eyes on myself. So it's like I was looking in a mirror, but I wasn't standing in front of a mirror. I was just lying on my mattress. And what happened when I looked at myself was I wanted to puke. I didn't. Purging is another element that I find tricky, but I felt ill. I felt sick. I felt horrified. I was like, ugh, this sight, I hate it. I don't want to look at it. And I think that was the depression manifesting itself.
Would you have been able to recognize that there's a part of you that is looking with such a negative eyes towards yourself?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's a common theme in my life, and it's something that I've struggled with for a long time, but it was the first time I really felt it.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic expression of the inner critic, and most of us have that.
Yes.
But how helpful it is to have it so vividly exemplified that it pains you, it hurts you. Wow, look at the hurt I'm doing to myself while I'm being so critical. well, we're thinking, what's the hurt in being a little bit critical to myself, right? Why should I always be positive? You cannot always be positive, some people may say. But having it so dramatically exemplified and seeing, well, look how much I'm hurting myself by looking at myself this way, nothing compares to that kind of knowing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's when, and that first night when that happened to me, I started crying and crying and crying because I was like, this is not fair. This is not fair. And the reason it's unfair is because this self-criticism, and we talked about this a little bit in our integration session as well, but it comes from the relationship I had with my mother. She is quite a critical person, and she really taught me to see myself that way. Like I wasn't deserving until I had achieved, et cetera, et cetera. And I, in that moment, even though it wasn't so clear, I recognized it. That's why I was crying. I was like, it's not fair that this was instilled in me, that I feel this hatred towards myself.
Yeah, the inner critic is never something that we acquire by nature. It's not something we're born with. And it's always an integration of a parent or a parentified figure within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So I was heading into that with the second night, and I remembered that I don't remember how it started, but I do remember that I suddenly experienced on the second night, of course I took the first cup, nothing happened. I took the second cup and things started happening.
Another theme, another pattern.
Definitely. So the first thing that I experienced was I was holding my own hand. My one hand was holding the other hand. And I study somatic therapy, which is a form of hands-on therapy where you work with the body with touch. And everybody always told me in my trainings, oh, you have really powerful hands. When you touch me, I don't want you to stop touching me. I really feel power in your hands. And I'd never understood what that meant. I thought, okay, well, my hands are really warm. I don't know. Like, okay, they are warm. But in that moment on the second night, I was holding on to my hand with the other hand, and I really felt this incredible power in my hands.
And as you speak, I like to observe your body, and I notice that your left hand is covering the right hand. Is this also what happened during the session?
Yeah.
Was it the left over the right?
Yes.
And why this is important, because this is then the type of work that I like people to do during this type of sessions, and perhaps you've done it given the somatic experience, somatic methodology work experience that you have with you, is left side represents the feminine in our lives, or feminine energy in our lives, and then right side represents the masculine energy. And what I like is the power of the feminine that kind of holds and supports in that moment. So there's so much symbology in the left over right, hand holding, support that's being given, realization with respect to the power. We spoke about the power of your feminine and the importance of bringing that back into your life. And beautiful how your left hand is now saying exactly those things in a somatic way.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that symbology, but that's super interesting and really makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, and what happened next was similar, but bigger. And that was that I went into a kind of child's pose position, and I had my hands clasped over my head the same way, left over right. And I was kind of rocking, and there was music happening, and I felt my hands on top of my head, and I said to myself, I love you. And then it was like my body was like my heart was like a skittish cat, where it was like trying to run away. It was like, no, I don't believe you. And then I was almost like, I did like a sweeping, and I brought it in, and I said, yes, you, all of you, I love you.
Oh, this warms my heart.
Wow, the feeling was unbelievable. I don't think that I've ever experienced self-love, certainly not like that, like I did in that moment. Wow.
That could have been the end of your session, right? Wow.
Truly, it was such an amazing transformation. And then I went to the bathroom, And I looked at myself in the mirror. And it was amazing. It's amazing what these psychedelics can do, because I saw myself as a stranger looking at myself. And I said, hey, I love you. And then I kind of like turned around and caught my own eye in the mirror. And because of the power of the drugs, it was like there was a lag and there was somebody turning away from me, but still keeping an eye on me, and said, yes, I love you.
Oh, I love the rewriting of a pattern that just took place there, right? Because you had that experience, the critical self looking at you, which was the integrated mother voice within yourself, and you took it and just threw it away in one single night of therapy, which otherwise would take 20 years of therapy. And then you rewrote that, and you brought a new healthy anchor and proxy for yourself, as in, this is how you're supposed to talk to yourself. This is how you're supposed to look at yourself. And this is who you really are.
Yes, exactly. And it really helped me to, this thing that I was doing, this trying to make myself disappear in conversations, it erased that, because I suddenly saw, wow, this person, when her heart is open, she's amazing. It sounds funny to me even now to say it, but that's how it feels. It's really, I finally understood like what my partners saw in me, what my friends saw in me, like, wow, there is this really powerful person here who has so much love and is able to be so present. And yeah, it was amazing.
With the erasal of the pattern, or the rewriting of the pattern, suddenly you erase also the coping mechanism, which was a maladaptive one, right? Let me make myself invisible. Let me make myself not seen, because I am not worthy to be seen, because I'm not a likable human being, because this is the voice that I've always heard since I was a small child. Oh, yeah. Breaks my heart.
But I feel great now.
Breaks my heart in both a sad but also a beautiful way.
Yeah, so indeed, if this had been the end of the session, it would have been fantastic. But unfortunately, there was still a lot of fear that came up as a response to this. And of course, if somebody has never experienced self-love in their entire life, and suddenly you're saying this hugely powerful thing to yourself, I love you, all of you, no matter what, it's scary. It's a scary thing. It happens in relationships with people all the time, when one person really loves somebody, but they're not prepared to receive it. Of course, that happens. It's so common. And so that happened with me to myself, in a way. And I, same way as the first night, the shaman was saying, okay, we're closing up the ceremony. You had a great night. And suddenly I had this huge wave of fear. And I started dissolving again.
What was the fear related to? Can you recall?
I don't know. And my shaman asked me the same thing. He's like, what is this that you're so afraid of? And I couldn't verbalize it. I think it was a fear of death. That's the best way I can put it. And I think that makes sense to me, because something so scary as being fully seen and loved for who you are, again, I can only compare this by looking at two people instead of one, but that can feel existential.
And being fully yourself as a child, where you have a critical parent, can be associated with death, because that's why we make the choice to comply with the requirements of psychological traumas of that person at that moment in time, because you feel that if I don't give up myself right now, if I don't stop truly believing in myself or being who I am, I will die. I will die. And I'd rather not be who I am than die. I'd rather turn against myself than die. Wow.
Yeah, that's an excellent way of putting it. It really is what happens in childhood, and it was a beautiful reflection of my inner child at that moment.
Yeah, the reason you cannot verbalize your fear is because you cannot have a cognitive memory to it. So it's something that has happened either before the age of 4, I believe, is when we are able to have cognitive memories. And that shows that the disassociation, so the inability to associate to it. Like, I don't understand where that fear comes from.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so it was a long time coming down that night. I was so grateful to the entire team that was there. My shaman sat with me, and he gave me more tools. He gave me more tools for dealing with difficult situations. And in this case, it's another one that's going to sound so brutally simple, but he was saying, inhale love, exhale confusion, inhale peace, exhale fear. I mean, this is something that I've done in yoga and meditation for years. But in that moment when, the line between your mind and reality and everything is a little bit thin, it's really powerful. And he was saying, just keep doing that. Keep breathing in what you need, keep breathing out what you don't, and do that until the screen changes, until things are different. So I did.
Oh, bless the qualified and good people out there who do this work. Bless them for knowing exactly the tools that they need to give us in the right moments in time. Yeah. Just a simple touch of a hand can mean the world to someone in such a situation. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Yep. And then luckily ended the night I was able to go to sleep. It was challenging, but I managed it, and really felt myself just landing a little bit. But it did make me worried going into the third night. So, yeah. It was the first time I did 3 ceremonies, the first time I had done 2. So, yeah, to your point, I already felt like, whoa, so much happened. What else? What else is there? Yeah. So the third night, I again took the first cup and nothing happened. And by this point, I was starting to realize that's also the fear. I was really sitting there, and I think, like we talked about before, where I was trying these spiritual things like sound healing, and I had this critical brain going, this is silly, what are you doing? That's exactly what was happening here. I was sitting there, I was taking ayahuasca, and I was thinking, oh, this is silly. You can't even take psychedelics 3 days in a row. Like, surely nothing is going to happen. Like, what am I even doing with all these people on these mattresses? Like, this is stupid.
How is there also an element of needing more, not being okay with what I have already, needing something additional or extra, and always the next cup, always more, another session. And this I can relate to very, very much. I've always needed more. So 1 cup is never sufficient. Yeah, it was really interesting. And at this point, I was thinking like, okay, well, it's the 3rd ceremony, so it's okay. If nothing happens, I'll just enjoy the lovely music and I'll have a great night, and it's going to be fine. So this is a tool in and of itself.
Yeah.
Self-talk.
Yeah.
I surrender. I'm okay with what is. I don't need to change the circumstances. And that's fine. Yeah. So I'm highlighting this because this is the type of inner dialogue that I believe is so helpful in this kind of circumstances. Yeah, definitely. And it takes a while for that to really be true, right? Like, you can say that to yourself from the very beginning, but there's a certain point where you really accept it. Right? And so that happened for me. I was like, it's really going to be fine no matter what. But then, of course, they offer the 2nd cup, and I take it. And my shaman said something really interesting to me as I was taking the 2nd cup. He said, well, now you feel nothing, and when it starts happening, you feel scared. And I was like, yeah. So what do you recommend? And he's like, well, let's just follow the ritual, just take the cup. And then he said, but trust yourself. So simple. But that's when I remembered the bird on the branch and the ability to fly. And so I went back to my place, I took the cup, and I thought, okay, trust myself. And so at this point in the night, then I really started to feel something happening.
I felt a little bit, again, of that dissolving starting to happen. And at this point in the night, there was a point in the entire room where everybody went a little bit crazy. And in particular, there was a participant in the room who had what seemed to me like a psychotic episode. He seemed to have lost touch with the real world entirely, and it was loud, and it was scary, and it was impossible to ignore. And at the same time, really the same time, right? Even before any of us, even before I was aware that somebody else was having a really strong experience, what I felt was this overwhelming amount of fear, to the point where I was about to start screaming. Yeah.
And was your fear related to what was going on in the room, or was it your own personal fear?
It was
and
personal.
Suddenly it was externalized also in the kind of enactment and constellation that took place in the room.
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly what happened. So the room was still quiet, but I suddenly felt this like grip of fear, and I thought, I cannot handle this. I really cannot handle this. This is way too much. I need help. I was like this close to putting my hand up to scream for the shaman, for anyone who could just come and help me. And again, I couldn't tell you what the fear was about. It shouldn't have been about dying, because that had been happening all along. But it was really massive, and truly I felt like I was skating the line between insanity and not insanity. And yes, and at the same time, there became this explosion was happening in the room from another participant that started. And I remembered, trust yourself. And I remembered, breathe in love, exhale fear. And the best way I can describe what happened is I took that fear that was coursing through my body and I transformed it into love.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult even to remember or to describe how and what happened.
Mm.
But suddenly I was fully present and alive and
Empowered?
Yeah, empowered. Exactly. That's how I felt. And of course, it was very scary and concerning what was going on in the room with the other participant. But I kind of leapt over the fear. It was integrated. It was, and actually at this point I started purging.
Yes, finally. Because we discussed during the pre-integration session that you were not able and didn't want to do any kind of purging. And I said, I hope you do.
Yes. And it was not violent vomiting like you described. Yes, but I did. I went to the toilet and I had like both everything going on at the same time for a while.
Wonderful. Why I love that is because our physical somatic body knows exactly what needs to psychosomatically be released. And sometimes we spend so much work mentally and so much energy goes into trying to understand, explain, process, integrate, figure out, cut into pieces, and so forth. Meanwhile, the best work happens in this type of way. So it's sometimes so. First of all, the experience that you are describing to me with relationship to fear, very much speaks to something that you experienced during a time when you were not able to cognitively relate to it, and explain it to yourself. I'm also loving, and I would like to really highlight the interplay of the elements of the inner work that you're doing, the inner experiences that are taking place inside yourself, and the outer systemic work that takes place or kind of organizes itself for you to tap into your power. So there is something inside of me, and this is just my intuition, and I'm going to pose it as a question. Could there have been something in your life that is comparable to this situation with a psychotic experience being seen outside of yourself while you're small, too young to explain it to yourself, that causes so much fear inside your body that you're just not able to contain, and actually this madness that happens outside of you is a near-death experience for you as a child in and of itself. And how did this constellation play out, especially and just for you, in a most perfect way?
That's a really interesting supposition. I think I obviously cannot remember any moment like this specifically, but I do know that as a child I witnessed a lot of unexplained rage.
From people around you or
family members. And I from family members, and I remember some of those times, and I'm sure that before I remember, there were many other times. It was always frightening, confusing, all the things that you would imagine a child can experience when there's just rage, and it was not necessarily directed at me, so it is a little bit similar in that way, that there was a mass explosion of unpleasant emotion, and suddenly I had to somehow witness it and process it.
And the helplessness that a child feels in that moment in time, and how you feel completely powerless, and how you learn to integrate the powerlessness as part of you. And you believe, I'm just useless, I'm just powerless, I am not able to do absolutely anything. And how does this become a learned experience that you take with you throughout life, and you learn to work hard in order to accomplish something, and yet somehow all the while with this work is always driven by this powerlessness. And how beautiful then that this poor man who had a psychotic experience kind of synchronously, I cannot see it more like anything else than anything less than synchronicity, and just all the elements perfectly aligning to bring you exactly the right type of stage on which you can replay the same situation again, but now with the tools and with the help and with the support, with all the work that you've done to date, in order for you to take your power back. And how this part of you has been calling you all along. And this is the part of you that brought you to that session, part of you that brought you to the program that we're doing together, to the work that we've done before the session, the work that it's been all along calling you. Your power was saying, come. It's time to come home.
Yes. Yeah, that's how it felt. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you mention that we learn to be helpless, because I always thought I was not a person you want to have around in a crisis. I don't know where I got that idea. I've never really experienced any particular crisis that I handled or not. But I had this belief, like, I'm useless in the face of something bad happening or something scary or traumatic happening. And that was reversed. And so what happened next is there was a little bit of a silence over the room. The person who was having a psychotic experience was being helped somewhere else. He's fine, by the way.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there, and I really felt this amazing sense of calm. And I was thinking, like, and this is where we come back to my purpose. I was thinking, like, okay, I was seeing people around me, they were in their processes, they were tripping, and I was like, I'm not tripping anymore. No. This is me now. This is my purpose, is to be here, and I am a holder of this space. That's kind of how it felt. And at the time I was thinking, well, am I just scared and denying myself a fun night or whatever because this thing happened? But no, what I really think, it felt so aligned to my heart to be there and be present and witnessing. And obviously I wasn't like completely sober, right? I was still very much in an experience, but I felt fully present and, like you said, empowered, and like, okay, this is actually maybe my purpose. I am a helper. I'm a healer. I can help people. And so the room kind of, the night continued. People took the third cup. I did not. The music started up again. People were kind of going back into their own experiences. And this really interesting thing happened. I was sitting by the fire and just, listening to the music, going along, okay, this is great, I feel great, this is awesome. And this guy from across the room comes and sits down next to me, and I could really look at him, and I could see, like, okay, this guy is not okay. Something is going on with him. Not in an extremely psychotic way at all, but I can just tell, I could read him. He looks like he's in a really not good place. And I've never done this in a ceremony. I reached out, I put my hand on his back, and I said, hey man, are you okay? Are you good? Do you need anything? And he was so grateful just for that touch, like you said, in that moment. And he said, thank you, I really needed somebody to just come and talk to me. And then what he said was, hey, if it's okay, I just want to sit next to you for a while, because it feels like you're my anchor.
Wow. Oh. You see all those things you were judging about yourself, how they are your superpowers. Oh, beautiful.
Yes, it was really incredible. And I felt even already at that moment, I was like, what? An anchor? Me? But and I felt immediately the response in my heart come back, yeah, this is it. This is when I feel so empowered and so good and so right, is when I can use my intuition, my inner knowing, and be the anchor for somebody else.
By standing in your power and feeling empowered, and expressing the mother energy, which is also something we touched upon before you left to your session, that I felt that it's not running away from being a mother. That's what we discussed, not wanting to be a mother. I said this is the path. It's not away from the path, it's not around the path. This is the path. Being a mother is the path. And how you express that it can be different for many people. It can be in the form of a child, it can be in the form of a creative project, but it can be also in the form of being an anchor for others. And as long as you're avoiding that path and avoiding the mother because of the experience, that the learned experience of the actual physical mother that you've had, which needed to be rewritten for you to integrate a new type of motherhood, a new energy of the mother, of the nurturer, of the anchor, of being present, of being safe, of feeling stability and trust within yourself, of knowing I have all the tools, I'm a magician here, I have all the tools that I need in order to not only survive this, but thrive through this, and then eventually help others through that. And all of that happening in just this sequence of 3 nights.
Yes.
Wow.
And one thing I'll add to that is love, which is so hugely important in a mothering relationship and a mothering energy. But I think, to me, even though I've always been a person who falls in love easily, let's say, this really, to me, was rewriting the definition of it. And finally, it was not just loyalty, not just grasping, not just taking care of someone, doing things that they need. It was really feeling love, first for myself and then for other people. And the person that I helped, I really felt love towards him, like a very beautiful, open-hearted, loving energy. And that was also a huge shift for me, because I think, like I said, I've always been drawn to it because I'm drawn to somatic therapies with hands-on touch, to sound therapies, which work with healing the body through sound. All of that is in itself healing, nurturing, but unlocking the power to actually feel the pure love that stuff can carry. It is inside me, and really feeling that was so powerful. And really, that was a key rewriting moment as well, of love is not defined by your actions. It's a feeling, and people can feel it coming from you, and you can feel it for everyone, including yourself.
Wow. Yeah, we walk around thinking that we know love, and obviously there's a lot of exemplified expressions of that through television, cinema, and so forth, but also through things we are taught that love is, and then we believe that as long as we follow that script, we're kind of in love or doing love. And then what does it look like when you are being love? Not when love is a verb, but when you are, it's almost an adjective, right? I am love. Yeah, and it sounds very hippie-esque, right? For many people, like, oh, love, peace, and butterflies or rainbows or whatever they are. Very much like the 60s, but it bloody hell is like that, and the answer is always love.
I know.
That's how long or how much work does it take for us to understand what does that actually mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think I was lucky. I was so grateful to have had all that time. It was like the entire half of the ceremony to really experience it, and I felt it with that other person and with the other people that I spoke to and interacted with during the night. And then I also felt there were a couple of moments where I really felt little blips of fear coming back up. Like, uh-oh, are you sure this is safe? Are you sure this is good? And then, and I'll say it again because it's such a powerful tool, breathe in love, exhale discomfort. Breathe in love, exhale confusion. Breathe in love, exhale fear. And every time I would do that, and it would just, the love would come right back.
Melt away the fear and bring back the love. Yeah. So this is the post-integration work rather than pre-integration, which is, now of course you've experienced different perspectives or different ways of being, which until now you've only had one written script. Now you've seen, oh, wait a second, this script has been there with me for that many years. Right now, look at all these other scripts, and they're so much more fun. And I have the choice. It's not so many things that have happened in this ceremony for you have been done and cemented. It's finished. The foundation is there of the house, and yet the rest, the building of the house, the putting the windows in, the building the doors, putting the right walls in the right spaces, decorating all of that, that's all still to happen, and that's in the coming days. And actually, you've already experienced it straight away in the coming hours, even though you've stepped into that power, you stepped into the fullness of self, you stepped into what it truly means to be the feminine energy, the mother, the loving mother, nurturing energy, and how it translates into your purpose and into your mission in life. Still, you noticed, wait a second, look at this old pattern, this old glitch, it still wants to be coming online. And now it's up to me, with all my technological experience and my ability to, I don't know if you're working with software, but I'm just bringing that up. Yep. For some reason it comes up as a symbol or an analogy. Then it's up to me now to rewrite that old programming. Mm-hmm. And I have to do that with an active and conscious awareness. So nice that a lot of work has been done on a physical, nice that a lot of work is done on a psychosomatic experience and level. Good that all that energy has been shifted in my body. The multiple times I've died and released various layers of myself. This is how I experience or feel that your multiple deaths were symbolizing. And yet, here I come with all this stability, groundedness, and fullness of my heart, and with the old abilities of rational, left-brainy, cognitive powers that I need now to use consciously, in a pragmatic way, just to rewrite things that will show up for me still. Again, it's not to say that life has completely changed. The world around you is still the same. It's yet how you enter this world is completely different.
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, I think I was coming in with the idea of tell me my purpose, somebody. And I was hoping, I would the light would open from the sky and they'd be like, you must be a scuba diving instructor. But that didn't happen. I didn't get
Sucks, doesn't it? It would be so nice if you could sit down, take something, kick back, and then somebody would say, so from now on, you're a scuba diving instructor. This is the type of suit you will wear.
Yes, exactly. Great. But no, that did not happen. And so I really resonate with your point of the foundation is there. Let's build the house. The house is finding what that really looks like, living my life like this. I don't know. I got this strong feeling of what it's like when I am empowered and when I'm standing in my power. And I also got the intuition that as long as I follow my heart and this feeling in my heart, I will be aligned to my purpose. But I still have to find my actual place in the world and what that really looks like from a practical perspective.
So it sounds like you have a lot of things to be grateful for from these 3 days. Would you be able to summarize the top 3?
Top 3 things I'm grateful for.
Things, people, experiences, moments, highlights.
Yeah. I think I'm super grateful for the really simple reminder of how powerful little things can be, like breathing, like remembering not to take yourself too seriously, like finding lightness in a moment that feels really heavy and dark. How powerful that can be. And I say that as somebody with clinical depression. I'm not saying you can just laugh your way out of every situation, but you can make a moment so much better for yourself. And that moment then has momentum and power and it can build. So that's one thing that I'm super grateful for.
And for me, that's gnosis versus knowledge. Of course, you knew how to breathe. Of course, you've done these practices before. And what does it take for you to integrate that knowledge into such a powerful way that it becomes a knowing and helpful, right? Mm-hmm. It's only helpful when it's a gnosis versus a knowledge. Mm-hmm. Information is only useful up to a point, but all the information, and this speaks, there was a time when I consumed so much knowledge, books, workshops, therapy, knowledge. At some point, I saw that as a kind of a junkie who is consuming junk food, and then I visualized myself, well, what happens to a person who's taking so much knowledge in, and what am I doing with all that knowledge? And yeah, knowledge without experience is just that. It's kind of like a junk food, and this is what I feel has shifted for you. So yeah, of course you knew the breathing, but now you know.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think that kind of leads into the second point, which is so embodying these lessons is so powerful, and that's the reason I do study somatic work and sound. These are methods that can help people to experience these really powerful states without having to go through a massive psychedelic experience. Not that they're the same, but you can feel your heart. They're through very simple breathing techniques. I mean, really even just visualizing dropping from your brain into your heart and breathing there, you can feel it. And that is something that is super powerful, and I'm really excited to work with this more, because I've been interested in it for years, but now I've really felt the massive power that it holds to be able to connect somatically in an embodied way with love and with these really strong and powerful positive states.
Not only for yourself, but also for those around you, because as I mentioned before, I could connect to your heart, and throughout this entire conversation, which I want to keep going and on going, just because of the tremendous feeling of expansion that I feel around my body. And you can call it esoteric, or you can call it spiritual, or you can call it just energy, but we can even go into the science and the resonance of the heart and the power of the magnetism that you are radiating right now is so big. It's filling up this room that I'm swimming and swirling in it, and I'm thinking, this is so good.
Yes, exactly.
How much more of a purpose can you bring into this world, and improvement can you bring into this world than this type of a feeling? If you can make one more person feel this way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And just as a preparation for the world that's out there, and you're stepping into it with this new knowing and the new abilities and the new strengths and new beliefs in yourself, what are the top 3 things that you're going to do differently from now on?
Meditating differently. This is something I did over the past 2 days. So I came back Monday morning I woke up. I was like, okay, I have to maintain my meditation practice. And this is something, I don't know if you've heard this before, but I read somebody saying that meditation was kind of developed as a masculine activity.
Yes, because it's about taking care of the mind goes offline, etc. And then feminine practices are more about inviting and filling yourself up with this energy and love and nourishment.
Exactly. Yeah, meditation as I know it, as I learned it, is sitting very still, quieting the mind, control almost over the mind, like keeping, everything happens in the brain. And the more feminine energy is embodied practice. It's allowing your whole body to come online, actually, and be present in that moment. And it's very simple. Instead of sitting up, I wake up in the morning and I turn on my meditation timer and I meditate. But instead of sitting up straight and holding on through the pain of, my back is hurting, but I can't move because I have to be still. No, I let my body move. It's the morning. I want to stretch. I want to stretch my back, raise my arms, feel my heart, breathe into my heart. And if I want to be still, I can be still, but I don't have to be. And that is a really much better way of meditating for me that I'm so happy I've remembered.
It makes me think of Sam Harris's experience. Is like I was learning to meditate for years and years, and I was really trying hard how to do that. And it was only after he's done either an LSD trip or psilocybin, I'm not sure what exactly, maybe MDMA, that he said, oh, that's the most important tool that I came out of. It's like after years of learning about it, then I finally had that learned experience through that session. Then I came out, and that's all I do since then. So then he hadn't done any kind of psychedelics eventually after that. And the only thing he was doing is only meditation. So this is, again, another way to exemplify how important gnosis is versus knowing or knowledge or information. Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing that I think I would love to maintain is the looking at difficult situations and finding a way to impact my mental state with something easy. And again, this sounds so like blatantly obvious. Like if you're feeling bad, drink a cup of tea. But I do think that, and it's been shown that people with depression have a tendency to focus on the negatives, have a difficulty seeing the positives, have difficulty with mindfulness, with finding something positive when the world is getting dark. And that's not something that happens like that. It's not first you're fine and then you're not fine. It happens in stages, it happens in moments. And, we live in a world that has a lot of darkness in it. There's many times when I can feel my state is affected. Even, okay, let's not go to the darkness. Work can be annoying. People at work are annoying. I get frustrated because things don't happen the way that I want. I can either let that frustration fester in my system, or I can say, hey, let's take a breath here. Let's go for a walk for 5 minutes outside. Like, it doesn't have to be so bad. Again, to your earlier point, you don't have to suffer. You don't have to go through all the suffering just to feel a moment of lightness at the end of it. So that's another thing that I'd like to remember is when things get difficult, when things are getting darker, finding some way to bring the light back in.
And those some ways are already like listed in a number of tools. So the toolkit proverbial one that we put into your pocket before you left to the session, it's there for you in life.
Yes.
One thing that I'm not sure you've mentioned explicitly, but the visual aspect during the sessions. So I hear a lot of mental work, a lot of energy work, physical, somatic work. And you mentioned before that you're not able to have visions. Has that been the case again in this 3 days?
Yeah, unfortunately. I was really jealous of everybody who was seeing these incredible visions. But yeah, no, I don't have the tendency to have a lot of really concrete visions. I will see like light shows, and I love them. but I still have not yet. And there was a lot. We actually spoke a lot during these ceremonies about how powerful it can be when an animal appears in your vision or a person appears in your vision, and how you can even interact with those different visions and incorporate them into your experience. And I was like nodding along with my rational brain, like, yeah, I want to do that. That sounds great. But it didn't happen for me. Not this time, maybe in the future.
In generative trance, which is the cousin of hypnotherapy or the brother of hypnotherapy, they speak of inabilities as resources. So at some point in somewhere in your experience, maybe you've seen something that wasn't pleasant, and then the resource that's developed in that moment in time is to not see. So that in and of itself is a helpful tool. And yet again, like the crutch that you no longer need when you're able to walk, if you're leaning onto it too much, is no longer serving. So then the cognitive work here is to practice the invitation to call back the power, just like you have called back the power of the feminine energy. Call back the power of visualizing, of visual abilities, and being aware very much with loving kindness of the resource and the coping mechanism that has been provided for you as a tool in order to overcome a certain difficulty. So that inability to see or visualize is related to something that was helpful for you for a long time. So it's a friend. Mm-hmm. It's a friend. Therefore, we don't want to chastise it, hate it, kick it out. We want to be grateful for it. We want to utilize it and understand it. There are moments when it's a resource. There are moments when we need it and we can call upon it. Like right now, I don't want to visualize these things, or right now, I don't want to have this, and that's a choice. And yet, why not call the power back that maybe has been relinquished, not as a choice, but as a response to a traumatic experience? Mm-hmm. I say yes. I say call it back.
I like that as a practice. Absolutely.
Here. The third eye.
Yeah.
So we moved from the feminine energy, right? From the womb and the belly, and then we moved into the heart and the love and the expression. Then we're moving into the throat chakra. So this is where we're sharing the knowledge, which is what we're doing right now. We're sharing our experience for the benefit of others and also for our own integration, and then stepping into the next stage. So this is your next ayahuasca session maybe, but who knows? Yeah. It doesn't have to be.
That'd be great. Because the third one for me is interpersonal. It's about how I bring myself into relation with other people. And this is something that I find I'm scared of it going away. I'm almost grasping it. Like right now, we are having a beautiful conversation. I feel so present. My heart is open. I feel connected to you. And yet I'm not clinging to any outcome.
We're not going to get married after this.
Let's go. Yeah, and it's not. There's nothing. I'm not putting any pressure on myself to deliver anything or be a certain way, and that is so beautiful. And I really just want to be able to tap into that energy in the future. And I'm already seeing it. I mentioned I have a pet who is very sick, and I'm already seeing how I'm able to relate to him in a way that is extremely loving, extremely open, but that it allows his experience to also be real, and the reality of his being really sick to be real. And that's just a small example of how I would love to connect with people overall in the future.
Wow, that's a beautiful practical exemplification of it. And let's honor Pumpkin for a second.
Yeah.
Who knows, you'll look at this video or recording in a couple of years and maybe it provides a moment of bringing him back.
Yeah.
Pumpkin.
My beloved best friend.
The
cat.
Orange furry kid. Yeah. We don't know what the fate of Pumpkin is, but he served such a beautiful role for you and still does. And also for this therapy session itself that you've had this weekend. It's incredible how much such a small creature can bring into our world, right? Yeah. And with respect to relationships, it's the love that you tapped into is not singular, is not attributed to one person. Suddenly you're going to feel it everywhere around you, to every human you meet, and that's my experience. And I love being in that state, because then it's almost like, okay, but I could be married to all of you. That's how much I love you. It's like just without the attachment of wanting to have this official formal definition of what a relationship should be. But that's the all-encompassing love. So much love for each individual that comes across on your path. And I have to be honest that I had forgotten it for a while. So you being here just opens up my heart, and I feel like I'm skyrocketing into that state again. It's so beautiful and so powerful and meaningful. So I'm very grateful, for you to choose to share this experience with me, with our audience, with the groups that we've been working with together. And for taking the time today here with us.
Thank you so much. It's been really powerful and enlightening.
Yeah. And we have a tradition. We end each episode with a question for the next guest. I know I haven't asked you because I forgot the question of my previous guest. But we usually leave a question for the guest that will come after. Is there something you can think of?
What lights you up?
Thank you, Shift Community. Thank you, Varia. And have a great week.